people signed up, so probably more people will be joining us, but I want to just go ahead and begin. If you'd like to introduce yourself, feel free to kind of put your name will come with it, but in chat, feel free to just go ahead and say where you are in the department so that we can get to know one another. This is the first in a 4-part series talking about kind of getting organizing and managing your life. Each of these are 15 minutes of kind of information and then 15 minutes of discussion. And so it's a really short amount of time to cover very much, but we're going to try. So I'm going to start with the first topic, which is determining goals and managing commitments. So a little bit about myself. I'm Jodi Holtrop. I'm the Vice Chair for Research in Family Medicine and a professor. I also am certified as a leadership coach. So I'm drawing upon that background for today. So what we're going to talk about is priorities and commitments, some strategies and tools, and discussion. So a place to start, again, this is going to be really, really quick because we don't have a lot of time, but is to start with your priorities. So priorities are things that are important to you. And just recognizing that you can identify what is important to you is a first step. A lot of people go through their life just whatever comes at them, and then they kind of deal with that. But getting out in front of it and thinking about what's really important to you is a really good thing to do. So, it's really hard to, go through and determine your priorities in a very short amount of time. But I want to get you started in asking yourself to be your own coach and ask yourself some powerful questions. Or to get a coach to help you figure out. So when I went through my coach training, one of the things they focused on was this idea of powerful questions. So you ask yourself some hard questions and see what your answers are. So here are some examples. What's the balance I wish to have in my life? What will advance me versus keep me in place? Who do I want to be versus what do I want to do? What do I most value? What is important for me to do well versus maybe just to do okay in? 5 years from now, I'd like to say I have. So these are some ideas of some ways that you could think about your priorities. A few tools that you might want to use. I'm starting with a very broad point of view to begin with. So one way to think about priorities is for your overall life. I come from a public health and wellness background, and so I kind of like the wellness wheel. The wellness wheel is this little colored, circular type of thing up here. And if you Google wellness wheel, there's some questions and quizzes that you can take to really think about how much priority you want to give to these different areas of your life. Now, notice that occupational is only one area. So this is not a talk about just, priorities for work, though that is certainly important. But there's a lot of other priorities in your life in terms of your intellectual, spiritual, physical, etc. So that's one very broad way to think about, what are my priorities and how do I want to spend my priority time across the time that I have. The second bullet point is the 9 whys. So this is priorities for who you want to be. So regardless of the different kind of quadrants of your life or, categories of your life, the 9 whys by Dr. Gary Sanchez down here at the bottom is really to kind of give yourself a little bit more of a philosophical view. What kind of person do I want to be? What is a priority to me in terms of how I want to be in the world? So these are 9 areas that you can examine to contribute to a greater cause, to add value, to have relationships, etc. So that's a different way of looking at priorities. And then the third is priorities. I said for work, but it could be for anything. I like the 9 whys of liberating structures. So essentially what you do is to try to get at the root cause of really how you're spending your time and if that's a priority for you. So an example of how that might work would be that, so for example, I might say, I'm vice chair for research. So therefore, every Wednesday at 9 o'clock, I need to go to the executive committee meeting. And I might be feeling like, I don't have time to go to that meeting. This is not true, but well, sort of. But anyway, so I might ask myself, well, why am I going to that meeting? Well, the answer could be, well, because I'm vice chair of research. Well, why am I vice chair of research? Well, because I really enjoy, helping support people do research. Well, why do you enjoy supporting people doing research? Because I think research is important. Well, why is research important? And so you can kind of, keep going with it, that you end up with like research is important because I want to help make things better for our patients, that we want to understand what works. So it helps you get to the root cause of why are you doing what you're doing. So those are 3 different ways to look at what might be a priority for you. The other thing is to use, it says stuck, ask your friends and family or get a mentor. People around you are good reflections. They can be, the mirror for you and help you say, well, it seems like you've always liked this or you've always wanted to do that. So that's another way to think about it. Once you have some ideas about your priorities, I encourage you to write them up as goals. Many of you are familiar with SMART goals, which is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So if you want to get from what's a priority to how you're actually enacting it in your life, goals are really helpful. When you're very vague and say, oh, this year I'm going to get more fit, or this year I'm going to be a nicer person, it's really hard to know, how you're going to do this. So here's a couple of examples. By the end of 2021, I'll get a coach and together we'll figure out a plan to manage my time. Or each day for the next week, I will give at least 1 compliment to my children. It sounds a little, kind of, elementary, but it really does work. So then the next question is, do your priorities actually reflect your commitments? If you really think something is important to you, then, and you're not spending any time on it, then that's kind of poor alignment. So your commitments become how you spend your time. And in future sessions, we're going to talk about like how to kind of equate, make time for the things that are a priority for you. So we won't go through that a lot today. But in coaching training, a lot of what we talked about was not time management, but commitment management. Your time is ruled by what you've made commitments around, and you make commitments around hopefully what's really a priority for you. I also just want to make the caveat that there are priorities for you and priorities that other people have for you. And sometimes it's not like you can just kind of say, oh, this is my priority, so this is how I'm going to spend my time. Lots of people, like bosses, parents, partners, etc., have input on what they think is a priority for you and how you should spend your time. Now, it gets a little tricky because sometimes things that you want versus what others want get, a little kind of conflated. Like having a relationship and being a good person is a priority as well. So attending to what other people want for you is something to think about. So I like the 20-minute life checkup. Essentially what this does is to help you kind of like, if you ever want to like go on a diet, you write down all the foods you eat so you can educate yourself on what you're actually doing. This is kind of like that, except what you do is you start tracking like, what am I actually spending my time on? And then you organize what you're spending your time on by how much time you're spending from low time spent to high time spent. So that's that x-axis. So you might write, a low time amount spent is playing with my dog. And a high amount time spent is being on Zoom meetings, and then you have a whole bunch of things. That's what mine would be. A whole bunch of things kind of along the axis there. So you've got this kind of continuum of low to high time spent. And then you have the y-axis where you're looking at to low to high priority. Maybe playing with my dog is also a low priority and a low amount of time. So that's pretty good alignment. But maybe, a high priority is for me to spend time, at work writing papers or engaging with people and not being on Zoom all the time. So that might be a misalignment. But anyway, then you end up with this kind of grid, and then you can put your activities into one of these 4 quadrants. So to go through this really quickly, the left top quadrant is yellow. This is not good. Try to move these things. These are things that are high priority but low time over to the right. If they're really a high priority for you, what will it take to get, you from the left box to the top right box? You'll notice that the 2 green are good. If you're spending a high amount of time on things that are high priority, that's good. You're doing things that are important to you. The bottom left box is also good. It means you aren't spending much time on the things that aren't important to you or aren't important to others, that have influence in your life. And maybe you can get rid of those things. The bottom right is red. So this is the bad box. It means you're spending a lot of time on things that are not important to you. So, you can kind of go through this exercise and really educate yourself about, how you're spending the time versus what your commitments are versus what your priorities are. So then you got to make a plan to change. Now, okay, we're not going to go through all of like how to make a change in your life in a couple of minutes, but a couple of things I just wanted to mention to you that sometimes it's not clear what is a priority because it all seems like a priority. For example, lots of things might, fall into, doing certain aspects of your job. But I encourage you to try to do maybe like a ranking exercise. If I had to choose between doing this and doing that, I would pick this. And then try to understand why you would make that choose, force yourself to make a choice between one or the other. So that way you can help you to kind of think about what you would prioritize. The other hole that I see people fall into is sometimes roles are not clear and you're not sure what you need to do to be successful. So like say for my job with vice chair for search, like lots of things come at me. They all seem like something I need to do well. How can I choose? Well, you can do the A versus B exercise, but you can also, talk to, I could talk to Frank, our department chair, what are the most important things? Talk to some of my faculty. What are the most important things that I need to be doing? And then out of the hours I have in a week to devote to that, what are the most high priority things that I must do? The other example under the bullet point is like, so I have 3 children, they're grown now, but I always ask myself, like, if I'm going to be a good mom, what's the standard for that? Because it seemed like that could just be this unending vat of like need. I would never like have enough time for it. So what is the right amount of time to spend with my children? Obviously this causes you to do some exploration and deeper thinking about what your priorities are. But I think it's important to acknowledge that some of these things are really kind of hard to know. Like it just seems like, where's the line? All right, so in terms of like actually getting there, that's a bigger discussion, so we're not going to get into that. But I want to leave you with the why. I'm always interested in why would we even do this? I like the quote by Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. So if you flip that, the examined life is worth living. So it all starts with an awareness, examine your life to understand what matters to you and then act accordingly. And I took this from somewhere else. It's a little bit, a little too happy here, but when you live your life by your priorities, everyone will know it because you'll be putting your most authentic self into the world, spreading enthusiasm, joy, and good energy. Well, I don't know about all that, but at least you'll be hopefully more satisfied when you have a situation in which you're better aligned. All right, so that was, less than 15 minutes, good for me. So now we have more than 15 minutes for discussion. My first question is, and I'm gonna look for the chat now, is how do you determine if something is a priority? So this is kind of the sharing time. What do each of you do to help determine if something's a priority for you? I put some suggestions in there, but what other ideas do you all have? You can put it in chat, or you can just go ahead and take yourself off mute and share some ideas. I can't see everybody because I've got my presentation screen up, but go ahead and unmute and share if you'd like. My problem is having too many priorities, too many things in the upper right box. Okay, so how might you determine what's more of a priority than less? When someone else is depending on me, if it makes you happy, if it's contributing something better, depends on deadlines. What are the consequences? These are lots of good ways. If it's a request that from another one, I ask when they would need it, great. I'm gonna pick on Anne. Anne, what do you think might help you to determine what's more of a priority than another?
Well, I think that ranking exercise could be good, especially for some of the work-related things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be a little harder in the personal realm, just because then there are lots of other people that enter into the picture. But I think that ranking exercise could help for, direction to take with certain work projects for sure.
Yeah, there's kind of like this dilemma between when you do something and whether you're doing something, you know? We had this discussion the other day, yesterday morning among us in the Dissemination Implementation Research Program. And we were talking about when requests come in for consultation, and then we were saying, you know, to put it off 2 weeks. And I said, well, I don't have any more time in 2 weeks than I have now. Like, there's going to be more stuff, you know, so the question is, should we do this at all or not? You know, but sometimes it does help to delay. I see some chat, you know, in the chat about asking someone when they need it, you know, so that you can kind of titrate your work over time. But if you have just too much, at some point you've got to decide what is acceptable within your work situation or your personal situation is, you know, an acceptable amount. If someone who is a supervisor indicates that it's a priority, which sometimes requires asking the question of how would you like me to prioritize this among other tasks? Correct. Yes, with a lot of work-related stuff, you can ask those in your team or your boss or chair or whatever, you know, what is the priority? But, and that can be helpful, especially, I guess, if you're in a job where things come at you and you're supposed to fulfill those requests. But sometimes we're in jobs where you have to kind of think more about your own personal direction for your career too. And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a researcher, so I'm always thinking about researcher things, but you know, is it more of a priority for me to get these papers done first, or to write a new grant proposal, or to engage with this new, you know, person? And, you know, I'm sure there's probably good parallels for clinical, you know, should I address this patient issue or learn about this new thing, or, you know, whatever. But the problem is sometimes you get caught in the tyranny of the urgent and you never get to that important. That's another scale you can use, is the urgent versus important, is that we're always just dealing with all these urgent things coming at us. And you never learn about, oh, I've never gone and gotten my CME on that thing that I really want to learn how to do better clinically, you know, so there's those kinds of things. I'm kind of talking a lot. Who else wants to say something about this before we move on to our second question? Because we've got lots of time. Somebody help me out. Talk. Anyone have some ideas?
Hi, Jodi. This is Elizabeth Staton. I really appreciated on the slide where you had how you define what something is, what success at something is. Specifically, you were saying what makes a good mother, because I think in life in general and in terms of this kind of conversation, it really helps to know what you're measuring your success against. And if it's too ambiguous, that does seem like it would turn into a really large task to try and live up to something that's not even defined.
So you're a mother. What do you think? How do you define whether you've done a good job and good enough job in that category?
Oh, that's really tough. As my kids get older and seem like they're turning out okay, then I say I'm doing okay.
You know, that's really funny that you said that, because my kids are all in their 20s and they've all turned out okay, at least so far. And I feel like, well, me not going to that soccer game was probably okay.
Yeah, this is Heather Holmstrom. I often share with like younger faculty who are struggling with sort of the working mom scenario that when my kids played water polo forever and ever. And one of the things that I always felt very guilty about is that, you know, some of the mothers brought these like lovely casseroles for potlucks, and like really they were still plugged into the wall somehow, and they were like warm and fancy. And I just could never get it together. I would be like flying out of clinic, barely making it. And, you know, I would stop at Domino's. And eventually by the end of high school, one of the kids did in their senior speech mentioned that actually the Domino's pizza turned out to be one of the favorites in the potluck. So in terms of like how you measure it, I think it's sort of what can you let go of that doesn't need to be a stressor? And how do you sometimes you have to sort of turn those lemons into lemonade, I guess.
You know, that reminded me of the ski team dinners. Our kids were all ski racers and we did the same thing where I fly in with my pizza pickup, you know, there's a good trick for any moms or dads out there with kids. There you go. You know, that makes me think about the topic of, you know, we're always such high achievers and we're trying to get an A+ in everything. And the question someone asked me once, what are you good with getting a B in? You know, or a C, you know, it's not like you're failing, but you're not doing A++ in everything because that's just going to be impossible to try to do. So to intentionally pick out, you know, I'm not going to get an A+ in bringing casseroles to the team events, you know, I'm not going to get an A+ in having the cleanest, most organized house, you know, whatever it is. No, I'm not going to, you know, I really want to make sure I have enough time with my family this year. So maybe I'm going to aim for a 4 on my annual evaluation instead of a 5, you know, and actually I talk about this with different faculty that where you are in your life, like probably getting a 5 at work might be a bad thing because you have other priorities in your life. You know, you want to do a good job, but trying to knock it out of the park every single year is going to be really hard. So any more comments on this? I'm going to go to the next question.
Jodi, this is Robin. I would just say that I have learned that if I don't prioritize myself first thing in the morning, right, with some sort of exercise or something like that, I get pushed to the bottom. That's also being a mom, right? You put everybody else's needs in front of yours. But I've learned this lesson too many times, but I still every once in a while do it. If I don't do some sort of physical activity first thing in the morning, I am not prioritizing myself and taking the best care of everything else after that, right? Like everything is better after I do that. My work is better, my relationships are better, everything is better if I take care of myself first.
Sounds great. Sounds like you've done the wellness wheel and you prioritize, what is that physical wellness, emotional wellness, whatever categories that goes into. All right, let's go to the next question. Whoops, let's make it go. Okay, so what works, we kind of already have been discussing this a little bit, but what works to help you keep your priorities aligned with how you actually spend your time? Any ideas on that? So Robin just gave one, which is to do something first thing in the morning. What else?
Write it down.
I was going to say,
okay, Allison. Is there anything, Allison, that that you've seen glimmers of hope that work that you could expand upon? Allison, do you want to share or no?
Sure. How I solve it is I have no boundaries. And so I just keep doing more and more. And quite frankly, 90% of what I do, I really like. So I don't actually mind. But that is the only way I can manage it, is expand the available time to meet all the things that appear to me important that I have to get done.
Are you talking about work-related things? So like you're
all
doing
of the above.
Well, then do you sleep?
That I have, no, I don't. That is a gift. I do not. That sort of maybe has what's allowed me. But I have also learned, to my dismay, that I am nowhere near as productive or accurate at 11 o'clock at night as I think. And I actually read some stuff that I write late at night. It's like, yeah, well, you got to redo it, or, wasn't as good as you thought. So it's been a lifelong strategy, but it's not a good one.
This is Heather Holmstrom. One of the things that I have had to do over the years is sort of let go of privacy a little bit, I think, because lots of project managers in the health system schedule things on my calendar. So I try to keep one source of information, and then I also, it's just everyone can see it. So the good thing is, so the bad thing, I guess, is that it's sort of a little bit of that lack of privacy, but also like if I have to take the dogs to the vet or I'm have an exercise session at a particular time, I think it does allow people to see, like I schedule that in. So I'm sort of try to stay a little bit technology based, partially because that's what I do most of the time. But I also use, like I have a sleep app that has, that tells me like, it is now time for you to go to bed. And now I'm going to start playing your sleep music so that you go to bed. And then it wakes you up with like energizing music. So I try to use technology a little bit because I find even on the weekends, if I'm going to go hiking, for example, if I sort of block that time and then pick another time that I'm going to work on, sending something to Elizabeth that I need her help with, for example, that sort of keeps me a little bit on track. So I at least don't feel like I'm spinning my wheels. So I don't know, I'm a planner, so it works for me.
Yeah, I'm seeing Christina's response kind of sounds similar to your shared calendar. It has my work and personal priorities. And are you talking, Heather, about the privacy, the way you can set privacy on the calendar? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Not so much that, but just that,
Okay.
once you sort of open your calendar up so people can see, because, sometimes someone will call and say, oh, I see that you're doing this thing in Fort Collins, so I shouldn't schedule this right after it or something. So I think
Right.
it's more just making completely transparent, I think has both advantages and disadvantages for sure.
Yeah, so that's kind of your own comfort level of how transparent you want your calendar to be. A lot of people look at my calendar personally, and I use the privacy function a lot. So, I block out the time, I put what it is and I can see it, and I mark it as private. And then, people can see that I'm not available. I also put a lot of blocks on my calendar, and that way it protects me from, if people don't just go in and take slots. It's kind of looks like I'm really not very available, but it's people who work with me know that they can ask, and can I use this or that block? And then I can release it rather than doing that. The other thing that I was picking up on what you were saying, Heather, is sometimes the way to make sure that you have time for your priorities is to be busy on the other priorities. I find, like after all my kids grew up and, graduated and went off to college in their adult lives, that it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm just working all the time, because I didn't have like, oh, there's this, ski race or soccer game or church thing or whatever that I need to go to for my kids. And so it was like I had like kind of like this open time, but it really, really open, and I still need some time to myself. So I just would kind of schedule in, like, I'm spending this 6 hours going skiing, and I am busy doing that, so I am not available to do something else. All right, well, great ideas, everybody. Thank you. We're almost out of time. So I just wanted to kind of mention that we are recording these sessions, so they are archived. You can ask Elizabeth where to find them. We're going to do 3 more. So the next one is on organizing and tracking your time. So that's 2 weeks from now. And so that's kind of like tips and tricks and ideas about how to kind of get your time aligned. So it's an extension of what we talked about today. Session 3 is keeping track of accomplishments. So this is probably a little bit more focused on kind of specific to work goals. But, other than putting things in PRISM or in our annual evaluations, what are some other ways that we can keep things organized and, take a moment to look back and say, oh, wow, I look at all I did this year, because that's important. We do a lot of things and then we don't celebrate those things. And then the last thing is around tools for efficiency. So are there some kind of tools, and mostly technology type things, but other kinds of things that we can do that will help us get things accomplished faster? I'm not an advocate of just like run faster, because, eventually you just kind of run out of time. But some tools will be helpful to be more efficient. And so we'll talk about those. Any other comments before we go? No?
I'm definitely looking forward to session number 2, tracking
Yeah.
time.
Okay. Well, again, if you have ideas or suggestions, if you want to co-present with us, like, let us know. But Tristen and I are going to do the next 2. And so we'll be appreciating any input you have for us that we can make it most useful for you. Again, nothing necessarily magic here, but the idea is to keep this topic that priorities are important, and let's all try to kind of support one another with what is really important to us, each of us individually. Thank you. Have a good day.